These massive storms put a lot of energy into the environment, and it is just amazing tree skiing in Champagne Powder. And we can ski more aggressive lines, some bigger faces, just a gold mine of areas to go. After skiing a bit around that zone, I was just like, I've got to come back. I live in Squamish, currently in Canmore, Alberta right now. Started off snowboarding, a lot of years ago now, when I was a kid back in the 80s, and then swapped over to skiing basically when I started working in the backcountry. Though I have been looking into getting a split board again maybe this year, but yeah, we shall see. Pass it over to Kevin.
Yeah, it's Kevin here. Just want to say, I would add, just in terms of introducing yourself, I would say that you are the guide extraordinary. I've had an opportunity to work with Monte all throughout the world, go through all sorts of amazing ski tour adventures from northern Japan to all sorts of places in Canada. And I got to say, the things that I would add to the list would be you're cheeky, you're a lot of fun, and we always have a blast. So I definitely add that to
it. Nice. Well, on that, let's get you completed introduced, Kevin.
So I see you've selected me in my great attire. This is me in my 2021 Get Up outfit called Neon Popsicle outfit. Basically, every single tour that I went on with Monte, I made sure I wore this beautiful outfit. But for 2023, I'm looking at going to the Pink Panther. So if we happen to be on with 57 again, you'll see the Pink Panther slides in the future. Other than that, I've had a lot of chances to be with Monte throughout all sorts of places. Great guide, great conditions when we've been. And if we don't have great conditions, he's able to find it, and which is, very unique and very key to what we do. So I really enjoy and appreciate being here.
Hey, thanks, Kev. Cool. Let's get started with what we're going to cover. A bit about skiing in BC, so British Columbia, Canada. Talk a little bit about lodges, huts, some of the differences, why you'd want to choose one over the other or choose either versus something different. Looking at a couple of our West Coast ski areas and some great trips that we have out here. We got a little movie and then some logistics and planning for anybody that's thinking about taking a trip into BC or the West Coast. We've got some tips and stuff. So let's start with BC's big. Lots of different mountain ranges, lots of different areas to ski. And so I've kind of picked the three main areas. We're going to talk about those a little bit, but I wanted to throw this slide up just to give people a feel for the size of British Columbia. You can see it's much bigger than, it covers a lot of Europe. It's actually bigger than France and Germany combined. And so when we're talking about these different areas, they're geographically quite separated. It takes a long time to get from the Rockies to the coast mountains. So from like Canmore, where I am right now, in the Rocky Mountains to my home in Kootenays or in the Coast Range, it was a little over a 12-hour drive for me when I came out. So this is the part of BC we're going to be talking about. On the right-hand side is your Rocky Mountains, and a lot of people know, say, Banff Park, Jasper Park, those areas, those are the Canadian Rockies. And then we move over into the next set of mountains, which we're going to call the Columbia Mountains because it's by the Columbia River drainage. And that includes the Caribous, Purcells, Selkirks, Monashees. And then we've got our Central Plateau, followed by the Coast Mountains on the furthest west side of the screen or left side of the screen. Each of these different zones is quite different with respect to terrain, types of skiing, that sort of thing. So we'll touch a little bit on that. I decided I'm going to start over in the Rocky Mountains because that's where I am right now. Furthest east, as you can see from the previous map, cold and dry. It's minus 30 Celsius days in the Rockies in the middle of winter are not uncommon. A thinner snowpack, so it's, with that cold and dry, it's drier. So dry means there's not as much snow, fewer lodges, lots of national parks, and great access to some different areas. Lots of alpine glaciated zones. As you can see here, this is a great camping trip. We did a multi-day camping trip up on this ice field in Banff Park. And this was one of the, beautiful line that we skied one day when the sun cleared up after a very unique thunderstorm that we had. You don't usually get thunderstorms in winter, but we had one on this trip. Just amazing zone, but very heads up hockey, I would call it, a Canadian term there. You want to have your head about you because the avalanche conditions, because it is cold and dry, can be challenging. This photo sort of shows the dryness of the area. So this is Kananaskis Mountain, so more on the eastern slopes of the Rockies. And you can see where, there is snow, but the wind has come through and scraped the snow off anything that was exposed and put it into the sheltered areas. But realistically, there's just not a ton of snow here. So moving on, Columbia Mountains. This is, again, those three mountain ranges I was talking about, Monashee, Selkirks, Purcell's, Caribous. A lot of people know this area because of Rogers Pass. And Rogers Pass is a super famous area and very popular ski area for Canada. And, you know, it's one of those areas that 20 years ago when I went skiing there, I'd see a few other people, where now it's been discovered and everybody is there skiing. Still cold. Not as cold as you get in the Rockies, but still, you know, it's not a warm area to go ski, but it's more wet. We get a lot more snow here. And that's why I sort of picked this photo is, you know, we're skinning up through some powder, and you never get fresher powder than you do in the storm when it's actively falling out of the sky. In my opinion, this is the world's best tree skiing. You get into the Monashee ranges in these beautiful old growth forests, and it is just amazing tree skiing in Champagne Powder. Still a little bit of alpine skiing, of course, in this zone. It also has its challenges because it's plagued with some persistent weak layers. So these are weak layers within the snowpack that give us an avalanche hazard that just doesn't really go away. It persists for a season, or at least for several months, hence the name. So the Esplanade Range, this is just on the other side of the Rogers Pass. So Rogers Pass, a lot of the skiing is on the south side of the highway, a little bit on the north. But if you were to go a little bit further north from that, that drops you into this zone. And we're looking at some, you know, surface hoar growing on the surface of the snow, basically your winter equivalent of dew. A little bit further south, this is more into the Monashees range. And you can see beautiful mixture of alpine skiing up high, off of Mount Hilda, which is a peak in the background, and then some nice gelated tree skiing a little bit lower. Not obviously old growth. This area gets hit too much with avalanches for the trees to get too old. But just over the mountain on the other side there's a beautiful cedar old growth, cedar and hemlock forest that is just amazing to ski through. Rogers Pass. How could we talk about this zone and not have a quick photo of Rogers Pass? So this is looking up the Illecillewaet drainage up to the bottom of the Illecillewaet Glacier. It's one of the main access points in this area to go and ski. So you can see where you go ski these slopes in the background here. All right, Coast Range, getting into my backyard. Furthest west of the three main mountain ranges, generally warmer and wetter. The coast gets a ton of snow. And because of that, you know, these massive storms put a lot of energy into the environment, and it can warm up. So we get the periodic rain events in the winter. Actually, you know, it's a blessing in disguise in a lot of ways, because these rain events basically wipe out our avalanche hazards and give us a clean slate throughout the winter. We get all this snow in an area that generally has a quite manageable risk from an avalanche hazard perspective.
Here, I just want to say that no disrespect to the other ranges in the province of British Columbia, but this is by and far my favorite zone of all of BC in terms of skiing, 100%.
Yeah.
Especially because, you know, from an avalanche perspective too, right? Lessening, not to say there isn't risk, there's always risk, but the ability to lessen that risk and through a variety of techniques and means that you're speaking of, it's certainly my favorite.
For sure. And you know what? And because the avalanche hazard is a little bit lower and generally more stable, we can ski more aggressive lines and get into, you know, some bigger faces, bigger lines and that kind of thing, which is, you know, it's a lot of fun getting out there and not always skiing really mellow lines, but having the option of getting into more technical terrain and skiing the couloir and big face, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I like that too, that we always seem to get the camera crew in closer so we can get some better shots too.
Totally. So this is the Tantalus Range in the Southern Coast Range. Basically, you can see in the right-hand side of the photo where the clouds part a little bit. That's the Pacific Ocean that we're looking down on there. And the town of Squamish, just hidden in behind the clouds in this shot. So where I live, and this is my backyard. Beautiful zone here to go skiing. One of my favorite areas. The real access into here is by helicopter, and the weather can be a bit temperamental in there. So another zone here, you can see what we're talking about with getting a lot of snow. This is immediately after a little snowstorm moved through the Journeyman zone. But we're going to come back and talk about this zone a little bit more. But you can see, while the coast isn't really known for its tree skiing, there's definitely tree skiing out here. And alpine skiing, there's lots of that as well. And it's definitely my favorite zone to get up into. Like, you know, you ski the trees when it's stormy, but then the clouds break, the sun comes out, and you got to go hit the big alpine. And here's the popsicle man showing us how it's done on a nice line, and again in the Journeyman This is taken from Garibaldi Park and actually taken from the summit of Mount Garibaldi, looking down towards the town of Squamish. So you can see where the ocean, the fjord comes in there and ends at the town of Squamish, way down in the bottom. And we're just up on the mountain right in behind town, looking down. The peaks to the right are the south end of the Townless Range. You can't quite see the north part of the Townless Range where the earlier photo was taken from, but it's in that area. And then those peaks way in the background that you can see there, that's actually the Olympic Peninsula. So looking down at Washington. Moving a bit further north, this photo is actually taken in the Duffy. So if anybody's heard of Whistler, from Whistler, you go a bit further north, wrapping around and back into the Coast Range. And this was our third lap of the day, and you can see the sun's just setting, and we're lining up for our final ski down. And actually, it was a ski right out to the car from here. Duffy Range is one of my favorite zones to get into in the backcountry and around the Squamish area, Whistler area. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about the different mountain ranges, let's hop on and talk about accommodation. There's two main types of places to stay in the mountains around British Columbia, what I'm going to call huts and lodges. So ACC style, so it's association or the Canadian Alpine Association, they manage the largest hut system in BC and Alberta. But of course, there's tons more that they don't manage. But because they do manage that, I'm just going to use that as a way of describing these types of huts. And that's why I've picked the Sulcan cabin here. This is up in the Rogers Pass area. And then a more lodge style, so luxurious style place. And there's a ton of these in BC as well. Some of them are harder to get into, having wait lists of over 3 years. And some other ones are a little bit easier, just depending on how discovered they are at this point. And so on the lodge side of things, here's the Journeyman Lodge. Let's start with the ACC style huts. This photo here is actually taken of the Haverhill hut, which is in the Tantalus zone. One of the nicest of these style of huts. Why would you go to these? They're generally less expensive. A lot of them are sold by the person by the night type thing. You don't have to book a week or book an entire lodge, but they do have limited amenities and generally communal sleeping. So what does that look like? That's limited amenities. They don't have fancy kitchens. So basic food. Human-powered access is exceptionally common for these, especially to keep the cost down a little bit. And mixed groups, of course, if they're selling them by the person by the night type thing, you can have a lot of random people getting together these things at one time. This is the A.O. Wheeler hut, again in Rogers Pass. It's just below the Sulcan hut. And this is a standard sort of morning where everybody's getting up and starting to get ready to ski for the day. And I spent the night here at this one, and I know none of these people, just a bunch of random people in the hut. Lodge style, generally more costly. And the reason I'm saying generally is because there's a gray range where the two sides blend a little bit. And depending on the access, the cost can go up a little bit. But nicer amenities, as you can see here, this is a après zone at the Journeyman Lodge where we would sit around after a day of skiing, have a nice bottle of beer or some wine while we waited for the chef to bring us out some nice food for our après. Generally single groups at these lodges, but not always. A lot of times one person books the entire lodge and then fills it up themselves. And they usually have saunas. It's just a really nice thing because then when we're out skiing all day, one of the lodge custodians, the employees will wander over, all radio down, okay, we're going to be coming down, get that sauna up and running. And so when we get down, the sauna's nice and warm and you guys can go for a little soak and a dip.
Hey, Monty, I think back to some of the lodges we've stayed at and some of the off the grid places and, kind of went into it kind of wanting to save some money. But I would say that for the small amount of additional cost, really, to go in and get into like a Journeyman Lodge or something more like the last picture you had up, the cost increase is very little. Really?
Yeah, the costs really, they're still quite reasonable. Like if you start comparing it to staying at a hotel in Whistler and skiing on a ski resort, a lot of these lodges come in at about that price or a bit cheaper actually on a daily rate. Yeah. Access. Here we go, looking at access. So the right-hand one here at the Snowcat, that was the Journeyman Lodge access. We actually took snowmobiles in there more often than using the old beastie here. They've actually bought a brand new Snowcat for this year. So we'll see, we get a bit more of a luxurious approach. And then the other one, like high terrain, like using helicopters, like this A-Star that we have in the photo here is super common for accessing these lodges because it's a bit more affordable using, a helicopter is because when one group flies in, another group flies out. So you're basically only paying for the helicopter for the direction you're flying in it, which saves a lot of money. And food, like Kevin was talking about, the differences and how they can be worth it. Well, you get some really good food at these places, and it's really nice because at the end of it, you're not always stuck with the dishes. Communal sleeping. This is one of the bedrooms at the Journeyman Lodge, one of the nicer bedrooms. They're not all this roomy, but this particular one has a shower and a flush toilet attached to it, like a nice ensuite, and you have your queen size bed, and it's really a hotel up in the hills. Why stay at a hut or a lodge at all? A lot of good reasons. The obvious one is, well, it sure beats staying in a tent. But some of the other ones are like no traffic, no issues parking. And a really big one for me is being able to plan my ski lines. I don't have to rush out the door, race to beat a whole bunch of other people to get on that ski line I want. I can wait until that ski line is ready and we're ready, and then we can just go up to it and ski it, and there won't be any other tracks in it because there's just nobody else around. Yeah, that's my favorite thing. I don't know, what do you like about staying at these remote lodges, Kev?
Honestly, man, I've really enjoyed just the company of the people, man. Like, you've always been able to put together great groups of people. I know a lot of times everyone's always concerned about, well, maybe I'm not a good enough skier, right? Or maybe I'm not going to get along with the folks, or I don't want to be pushed too much, or this or that. So you've always done a good job, I found, Monty, and your crew of guides and that, where you've been able to match people together really well. And then you've also had it at times where you're able to mix match the groups a bit with other guides, alternative guides too, so that we can break off and do some separate stuff so everyone gets a bit of what they need to. So I've always enjoyed that the most. And to be honest, even these other lodges where we're paying a little bit more money and we're going in and getting some fancy food and getting a nice sauna at the end of the day, I'll be honest with you, I don't feel like we're in pressure to go find a line the next day.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're the only group ski in the zone is us. And I just was looking at this photo here. So this is at the bottom end. This was a 7-day ski traverse I did a bunch of years ago, basically skiing from Whistler to Squamish. And that peak that's way in the background there, that is Garibaldi Peak, which was the peak that I'd had in that earlier photo where we were looking down at Squamish on. Let's talk a little bit more about a couple of these. So I'm going to start with the Harrison hut. When I'm saying hut again, communal sleeping, kind of rustic. Both of these trips I'm offering this year, so that's why I thought I'd highlight them. And every year, one of the things I really enjoy about skiing is going to a new area and really skiing some new mountains and exploring new places. And that's kind of what this trip here is about. This is an exploration trip. I have been to this area. I did some exploration last year with Arc'teryx. They wanted to get some great photos with some of their clothing and stuff. So they gave me a bunch of pro skiers, a few helicopters, and a photographer. And we explored around and found cool places to ski and took photos of it. And this area around the Harrison hut was one of the ones I just loved. After skiing a bit around that zone, I was just like, I've got to come back here. And there just happens to be a nice rustic hut right in the middle of the zone. So this is what we're looking for. Get into an area where we're just going to find some amazing skiing, some nice pitches, some cool mountains, and explore this zone. So the Harrison hut is located at the north end of the Pemberton ice field at an elevation of 1725, it's kind of in the sweet zone. I generally look for lodges or huts above 1,500 meters. Below 2,000 is kind of, I find, the sweet spot because that parks us right in the middle, halfway between the trees and the alpine, and gives us the most amount of options of different areas and ways to go. This area has a ton of different bowls, peaks, and everything to go and ski. It's very seldom reached because it's a really hard area to get into generally. It isn't an area that gets explored a lot. It would be a busy area if people could get here. If it wasn't just, some select hardcore people that were willing to bushwhack for hours on end to get into this zone, it would see a lot of traffic, I think. On that, we're not going to bushwhack for hours on end to get into it. We're going to fly in with a helicopter. Kind of the trip setup will be, I'm going to do 2 trips in there, each 5 days each. So then between the 2, I can dovetail the helicopter. So a group flying out and a group flying in using the same helicopter, because that allows me to keep the costs down a little bit. It'll be fully catered. So we won't have the rustic food. It'll be pre-prepared, and then we're warming it up and getting it going. Remote. There is nothing back here. So no cell service, no outside world, that kind of thing. When we're back in that zone, we're all by ourselves. For a trip like this, like these things, you got to bring in your own sleeping mat. You have to bring in a sleeping bag. Nothing's pre-prepared. We're going to be bringing in shovels because this is the hut, and we're looking at the loft. There's 15 feet of hut below this, and that hut is sitting on stilts. If nobody else has been in here before we go in, we'll spend an hour on the first day just digging a hole to find the door to get in. It's going to be basic, but it's going to be warm and offers a great place to stay in a zone that just doesn't see it. We'll fly in some firewood, so we'll have nice fires. I'm going to bring in a little generator and a bunch of LED lights so that we're well lit and we can enjoy ourselves that way. And also, there is no toilet here. There will be a drop toilet type thing, so an outhouse. But whatever. That's what this trip is. This is exploring, the frontiers of skiing and not being at a nice posh zone. Kind of the schedule, how these trips sort of shape up is day one, we get there. We meet up in the morning, sign the waivers for the helicopter company, organize our gear, fly in, dig out the hut, get set up inside the hut, and then avalanche safety. Because nobody will have been in this zone for a little bit, we'll do a little bit of exploration ourselves, poking our heads into the snow and just seeing what's going on. And then we'll run everybody through some companion rescue and transceiver searches, just make sure everybody's up to snuff and ready to get out and ski. And then we'll go ski a quick lap. And then after that, we just spend the days, get up in the morning, have a nice cup of coffee, quick breakfast, head out the door, ski, go back at the end of the day and have some dinner and go to bed and get up the next day and do it again. Who's this trip for? This, again, is for people that are willing to sacrifice some creature comforts for good skiing and some exploration. Go check out a new area that doesn't get skied very often.
That last Harrison hut there. So how many times have you been in there in the last couple of years? Has it been?
I've never been into the hut. I've skied around the hut. And
Yeah.
I worked that area a bunch of years ago because there was a group in there doing a power generation project. So I was in there forecasting for 4 years, avalanche forecasting, and really got to play around some of the zones. But this area is just outside of what we had to worry about as part of that project. And that's why when I had that money last year to go fly anywhere I wanted to go in a helicopter to find cool snow and good skiing, I flew back to that area to check it out. And what we found was even better than I thought it was going to be. That's why I want to go there this year. I did 2 ski runs in there and that was it. We moved on to another mountain. And so that's all I've done back in that area. So I'm really itching to get in there and explore that zone because I think it'll be a really special place to go skiing.
Yeah, it sounds exciting as hell, man. I kind of want to change the deal I got going on with you this year. Maybe going to
Totally,
Harrison
right?
instead.
That's the problem. There's so many good choices. Journeyman Lodge. We've looked at a few photos on this and I've danced around talking about it, but the Journeyman Lodge is basically a hotel in the mountains that's basically opposite Whistler Blackcomb. So from Whistler Blackcomb, if you don't go and ski on the east side of the mountain range or the east side of the valley, you hop into this little narrow valley that goes west, closer to the ocean. You find this beautiful powder pocket here that's called Journeyman Lodge. And we've got a little video here that we can watch that sort of highlights some of the area. There's a trip that Kevin and I did in here a little while ago.
Yeah, so here you can see us heading up the ridgeline here and through the valley.
Yeah, so this is going up Journeyman Peak itself, right? Which is a peak just about every group we bring in there we do Journeyman Peak because it's just so good. Some skiing on our first day in.
And a lot of people on this trip too, Monty, were from Europe with us too, which was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, good zone.
Yeah, good
people.
mix for sure. And it's nice. For a lot of this, I get the whole lodge. So then it's just us in there, a few guides, and you
here's
can see
Monty. Here's Monty letting me lead the group, which was nice.
Yeah, totally.
What I like about skiing with Monty too, everyone, is you can see here, gets everyone a chance to get out, do their own line, run their own line, get some video footage, get the drone up. Although Monty's drone skills aren't the best, he does tend to lose his drone once in a while in the snow. So you end up doing a search for a drone instead. Here he is setting us up for a good ski down, so everyone gets a good line and some good pictures. What I love about Journeyman, Monty, is you got all the amenities and that, but you're right there. You're not far from Whistler too. If we need to call in, to do something different, we can. So I'll give you an example, everyone. We had some good weather. The weather was going to turn on us, it looked like, but we had a good weather day. And our crew decided, hey, Monty, we would like to get a helicopter in here and go try another zone. And what was great about it is Monty, through his connections through that zone, being in the Squamish Whistler corridor, was able to contact, even pilots directly and have a conversation and see what we could do and what was possible. So those are the kind of things that I love about Journeyman. It gives you a lot of flexibility. And it's great alpine. It's certainly kind of soft, creamy type snow, but you got some good alpine stuff in glacier terrain going on. So
It was too bad we weren't able to actually make that helicopter drop work. We worked at it a bunch, and then the weather just wasn't cooperating, and which of course meant that we had just amazing snow because it kept snowing. But we never did get that helicopter. This photo, this is the gendarmes. You got to remember skiing off this zone, eh?
Yeah, I do.
And so yeah, this is me just dropping in on the first line on the gendarmes, and then you can see way in the background there's that long snaky up track, and that was our other group because this day we'd split into two groups. The other group wanted to go summit this peak that's way in the background there called Cal Pow. And we decided to just do great powder laps just right next to the lodge just because the skiing was so good in that area. This is actually just sitting around the table waiting for après, looking out the window and watching the sunset. And that's Journeyman Peak. It's an area that we ski once in a while, but we don't actually ski that zone too often, just that it's a little bit further away. And if the snow around the lodge is really, really good, it's why walk further just to ski the same snow when we can just ski the great stuff right where we're at. Let's talk a little bit about this versus Harrison. So we do both 4 or 5 day packages in here. How the Journeyman sets it up is they do 4-day weekday packages, the 5 days of the weekends. So they run Friday to Tuesday for a weekend, or Tuesday to Friday for the weekdays. Fully catered, amazing food. There's cell service in the area, depending on the carrier. Like I get good cell service at the lodge, but depending on who you have as a carrier, you may not get it at the lodge, and you have to skin up 100 meters outside to get the cell service. Access via snowcat. Or snowmobile, but now it'll be all snowcat. And the great thing there is there's 0 baggage restrictions. You can bring anything you want. Nobody cares. Pack as much as you want. Bring in, a nice bottle of wine for every evening, whatever it is, it goes. Whereas as soon as we throw a helicopter at it, weight matters and for everything. So we restrict people on the amount of luggage and the weight of the luggage they can bring in. Large lodge, 3 staff. There's 14 beds spread over 10 different bedrooms from some nice little cozy, what they call nooks, which basically it kind of feels like like you're on a boat kind of a thing, and you're in a small room on a boat, to the really plush rooms. Like I showed that one earlier that has its own bedroom and shower and toilet attached, that kind of thing. The sauna's on the edge of a creek, which is nice. So you can soak up the heat for a little bit, run down the stairs and jump in the water and go back up and heat up again. Running water, of course, obviously, if there's flush toilets and showers. There's the access. Was it you that wrecked the snowmobile that year, Kev?
It was, man. That's why there's no more snowmobiles.
Yeah, right. Yeah, one of the snowmobiles just engine blew when we were riding out. Standard day, meet at the parking lot, sign some waivers, organize gear, same sort of thing. We throw all our gear in these big sleds and they get pulled in with the snowmobiles, so we don't have to worry about it. We just have our ski gear with us. We head into the lodge, same thing, review snow safety. We want everybody on the same page if there's any emergencies, any issues, and then we go ski. Generally get 1 lap, usually 2 quick laps in before the day's over and we have to go back to the lodge and for a little après. Tommy shredding some pow, and that was, I don't think this was actually taken on one of the first days, but it's kind of like one of the areas that we do a first day run. And
that looks like you, man.
Yours truly. Yeah, exactly. I don't know what happened there. I don't think guides can crash, so something I just must have been tired and laid back.
Nice to see that you're human too.
This is on Ring Mountain. This is just across the valley again from Whistler, and this peak is it's a really cool mountain. It's called a Tuya. It is a mountain that is created when there is a volcano underneath a massive glacier, and the volcano actually the lava doesn't make its way up through the glacier, and so it has this really flat top. So there's very few of these in the world, actually. They're quite a unique geological feature. So we went up and skied this on the one day. And what we're seeing in the background there is the Pemberton ice field. And on the other side of the Pemberton ice field is the Harrison hut. So we can sort of see everything from here. At the end of a fun trip, got to get some group photos. So we've got the popsicle there on the left. And then, some of the other boys that were on that trip, including Tommy, the guy that we saw ski, he's there on the right.
Hey, Monty, what I like about this photo too is I know, again, people are always worried about, what fitness level you need and things like that. But here you can see we're a bunch of, I like to consider myself a young guy still, a bunch of young guys on the left-hand side of the photo. Then what you've got too is you've got some more seasoned folks who are with us. and really enjoyed having them on the trip. No problems for them to be, as part of our group, I found at all. You know what I mean? So
totally. And nobody knew each other
for
before this trip. Like this
correct.
was everybody except for the couple in the middle, of course, our Albertan couple. They're married. They knew each other. But outside of that, everybody on this trip was singles. Kevin, showing us how it's done in the trees. How about most unexpected?
Most unexpected, honestly, would be the terrain. Like I knew we'd have some glacier kind of alpine terrain and stuff, but what I didn't expect was dropping down. And when we get down into the tree line, there were some amazing shelves in there. Some really cool features that we were able to do, little cool jumps, all sorts of little cool features to go around. Really enjoyed that. Was not expecting that at all. Just to put this in perspective, we're only about an hour and a half from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada here, where it was pouring rain in Vancouver. And here we had absolutely amazing conditions. And on the first day when we didn't, you were able to find the conditions because you've done that zone a lot. You know the area really well, which is great. So you kind of know where the little golden nuggets are.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to know where these little powder zones are and stuff when the weather isn't as good or you can't see as well. So you fly into Vancouver, you're on the West Coast, you want to do some other skiing. Maybe you come to Journeyman with us for a few days and then you're like, well, it's been really good. I don't want to go home yet. What else can you do? Whistler Blackcomb, arguably the best ski resort in Canada. And it's just got options for everybody. And what's really nice is using the ski hill to launch into the backcountry. So that's what we're doing here. We're just outside the ski area boundary on this photo. You can sort of see there is a lot of tracks because it is popular for people to use this as a launch off point and then ski back inbounds. But what we're doing is we're just using it as an access and disappearing into the backcountry to go spend the day skiing, Whistler Blackcomb area, but off the backside. And there's some great stuff back there. Heli access ski touring, like Kev was talking about at the Journeyman, this is kind of what we were trying to add on to that package, but it can be a one of. And basically, we organize a helicopter, we throw 4 good buddies in the back seat, and we fly into just some amazing areas and land at the top of a ski run, just like we're heli skiing, just land at the top, helicopter disappears and leaves us. And we just, shred a beautiful line, flip over to touring, and we just spend the day ski touring. So instead of starting the day at the bottom of the mountain, you start the day at the top of the mountain, and then you just get to ski all day. Doesn't matter where we end up at the end of the day because I just call a helicopter and he comes and finds us, picks us up, and drags us back to town. I showed that one photo earlier, that sunset photo on the Duffy. This is another one skiing in an area. This is actually Joffrey Lake, so the other side of the valley from the previous photo. And this Duffy zone it's between Pemberton and Lillooet, so just north of Whistler, is just a gold mine of areas to go. Generally slightly bigger days because you're starting a little bit lower, got to work through the trees a little bit to get into the alpine, but once you're up into these areas, they're just phenomenal. Beautiful mountains. Let's talk a little bit about logistics and that sort of stuff. Getting around. You fly into YVR and you want to go ski around the Whistler, you want to get up into the Duffy, you want to get into these zones. Super easy. There's a daily shuttle, multiple daily shuttles from the airport directly up into Squamish and Whistler. So you can just hop on the shuttle and get to the area you want to be. There's also, of course, car rental dealerships, a whole bunch of them at the airport. So if you want a little bit more flexibility, you want your own wheels, just rent a car. There are tons of places to stay around Whistler, lots of hotels, that sort of thing. And the same goes for Squamish. Pemberton is a really nice area if you're planning on skiing the resort a little bit, but then want to break off into some other areas. It's a great option because you're past all the traffic. All the traffic that Whistler gets is from between Whistler and Vancouver. So if you're in Pemberton, you're on the north side of that, you're outside of that zone. It allows you to get out into the Duffy and some of these other areas. Of course, I'm a bit biased. I really like Squamish. And while you're into more of the traffic corridor, there's some amazing skiing just in Squamish, like this photo right here. We just left from Squamish in the morning and went and skied the local mountains right here. So a lot of options for places to stay. Don't want to fly with my skis. I don't want to fly with my avalanche airbag. Is the airplane even going to allow me to bring my canister with me? That kind of thing. Absolutely no issues. Lots of companies around that just will rent all this kit. The only recommendation I would have is get it early. Since COVID has happened and all these issues with the supply chain, there is a limited amount of stuff. But as long as when you're booking your hotel, if you can find a hotel, you'll be able to find your gear. And just if you don't want to travel with yours, just rent it. Of course, generally you'll want to travel with your ski boots, but renting the skis, transceiver, probe, shovel, any of that stuff, easy peasy. And if you're on any of my trips, I have all that gear, transceiver, probe, shovel stuff for rent anyway, so not a big deal. Now we just need winter. We just need the snow to start flying. I want it to snow, every night and be bluebird every day. Thank you, everybody.